I came up with these points during Justin Trudeau's time as Prime Minister. And surprise, surprise, my email, because I had two really good points. And in recent times, another additional good point, which is related to my background in chemical engineering. So my email, I guess to protect me, Gmail never even sent my email. So I had to get some bargain out of it, so to speak. All right, so here goes. UNDRIP is the UN Declaration of Rights for the Indigenous People. And I'll quickly go through some points which are on the internet. The Justin Trudeau government's implementation of Bill C-15 or UNDRIP and its impact on Manitoba. So I've chosen Manitoba, but it's relevant to all provinces. It's just that my own son, we will not discuss his name, all right, because he must be given complete kind of confidential status, and must be kept, his name must be kept confidential, because it could, he has signed agreements, etc. All right, but I might have let slip. So Gayatri Sitaram, the internet says the following. This is my introduction to my own topic driven essay. Bill C-15, an act representing the United Nations. Bill C-15 was the one passed during the Justin Trudeau time. An act representing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP, is a Canadian law that establishes a framework for the government to implement the UNDRIP. The bill was introduced in the House of Commons on December 3rd, 2020. Bill C-15's purpose is to ensure that Canadian laws are consistent with the UNDRIP, create an action plan to achieve the UNDRIP's objectives, address injustices, prejudice, racism, and discrimination against Indigenous peoples, promote mutual respect and understanding, establish accountability measures for implementing the UNDRIP. The bill affirms that international instruments like the UNDRIP can be used to interpret and apply Canadian law. However, the UNDRIP itself does not have direct legal effect in Canada. The need for legislation like Bill C-15 arises from the complex relationship between Canadian domestic law and international law. The UNDRIP is part of an international law, but how it applies domestically depends on how it's incorporated into Canadian law. So there are a number of websites on the internet, which I have suggested: canada.justice.gc.ca, and I read about, so that's the publication which has all the points of Bill C-15. So I've just given the link to it as it appears on the House of Commons bill. I chose 4 points to compare in terms of the performance of the Justin Trudeau government. The fact that it came into effect during PM Justin Trudeau's second term suggests that the PM, a white man himself, who has apologized for Canada's colonial past, has the conscience to recognize the need for the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous People in this country, and has taken the initiative to doctor this bill and have it passed in the Parliament of Canada. So the same applies to Prime Minister Mark Carney at this time, and he has he has his own style of governing the country, and he has his own bills, etc. He's passed his own bills, but it's early stages yet. The government has been in power for since since he was selected the second time, since early spring 2025. I chose 4 points to see how the federal government's policy has impacted Manitoba. So this is actually work for people like my son, as I said. All right, military. So one, military equipment such as bombs and firearms, which in the event of a fire could worsen the situation, causing many deaths and destruction of property, being stored on Indigenous lands. So these would have to be, given other places of storage, because as I said, if there's a fire, there's which had happened in Manitoba. There were forest fires which could have spread. It could have worsened things for the Indigenous people and their settlements, etc. The reservation is an old term. Their settlements and Indigenous settlements and Indigenous lands. 2, disposal of nuclear waste and other chemical waste on Indigenous territory. So you'll have to look into these, how many of the nuclear waste, all these We studied during I studied during my nuclear engineering courses. Professor Jervis, he was a wonderful man. Gave me two A minuses, as I like to point out. So he, discerning guy. As Professor Korshot, who recognized that a engineer like me, a female engineer like me, should be rewarded with fellowships. And there's always mention of Brad Sewell, who gave, who kind of was a little tight in as far as the purse string or wallet strings go, but he did give me a nice research sum of money for research. All right, so all this and this should not be stored on indigenous territory for at some point in time it could break through the barrier, the radioactive emissions, and then come out of the storage storage containers, and if it's more than ionizing radiation, then it could affect the indigenous people in very, of course, various ways. You all know this, all right? Nuclear radioactive emissions. So this is a common point: providing clean water for indigenous people. This had come up, and then. Four, the Trudeau government stand on affirmative action as termed in America under the Bill Clinton presidency, or reservation quotas for the lower caste, quote, as they were termed during the early post-Indian independence from Britain. And how have they done as far? And is there something like the affirmative? I've written about this, but I can't really, sum up what I've written, because I don't, one of my computers is defunct. So affirmative action, whether they deserve, for generations they've been told that they're not smart, and so that's bound to tell on their DNA, all right, on how the development, not to mention psyche as well. I mean, so that they grow up thinking they're not smart. This is the white man's territory. The white man has the intelligence. That's what they think. All right. So affirmative action gives them, with a few lower marks. You can't let them get ahead with really lower marks, right? They would also become ineffective engineers, doctors, or who knows, someday prime minister. The indigenous people, you never know, So that there's in government of Manitoba, Wab Kinyu is the premier. He's an indigenous man, yeah, and so he's made it to premier. So things could change, and but in some ways, I identify myself, because having lived in Canada and been born and brought up in India, Bangalore, with some of with quite a few of the white man's and white woman's traits and DNA, so to speak. Yeah, and lastly, what do I have? And so this. All right, okay, this is it. And let me go back to my email, and I have a couple of points there. Email. A couple of points there, which would be okay. The Professor Jervis had taught us that the Chalk River had in the 80s and 90s been used as a waste disposal for hazardous chemicals. And then of course EPA, and then National Pollutant Release Inventory, NPRI, in Canada gave out a list of hazardous chemicals that have to be banned completely, stopped using. They must be used, stopped using. They must be stopped from being used, and so they were all. But back then, the Chalk River had been used from wastewater effluent and treatment plants, etc. So they were all dumped into the Chalk River, and the fish would ingest these, fish swimming. And then the indigenous people, they love ice fishing and regular fishing, and they would eat the fish, and they had developed health problems. Yeah, and then Brockwich, that sort of scenario. But and the government apologized for it, etc. The Ontario government, and Chalk River is close by. Yeah, I think Pickering. I think, I'm not sure. You'll have to check on it. And so the government apologized, but fat lot of fat lot of good apology does when somebody is really suffering. To see that, and so other point: if raccoons dig up stuff burned in the earth, I know, because a raccoon dug up corn shoots a few years ago in our own home, in our own yard, which had planted corn seeds and everything, corn cobs, corn on the cob. And a few years ago, and ate all of it up and left the hole uncovered. It could come across obsolete firearms which could go off. All right, raccoons could go off. So all the burial underneath, underground, or storage facilities, who knows? Raccoons go in there, pull out the firearms, and then fiddle with it. You have monkeys. Monkeys are the smartest creatures. They can figure out on their own how to operate things, and then bang, bang, bang. You have a monkey shooting people out, and that's what it is. What is it? That's indigenous territory. And they sleep there, they live there, and the monkeys, but then monkeys don't live in Canada. There are no monkeys, so it's okay. But in India, they have water. There are monkeys. They're really smart. They could get them. So all these storage facilities have to be checked out. And if it's indigenous land, then where they've been stored, then they have to be sort of resettled, that sort of thing. So that's a part of implementation of UNDRIP. That's what I said until now. So that's those are the points. All right. Thank you, and happy ice fishing. Well, no, not yet, not yet. Fishing. Happy fishing.